Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Ready to be a leader? You might want to hear some advice from Adam Bryant first. Adam, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for the invitation, Bill.
Adam, you've written a book with the perfect name, The LEAP to Leader. The first paragraph, I kidded you before we got into the show today, the very first paragraph, you quote a prestigious leader saying, "After 6 months, I realized I had no clue how to be a CEO." Is this normal or the exception, or does this happen throughout a CEO's career?
I think these CEO jobs are just so hard, and you can have your theory of what the job is going to be like when you get into the job, but it's just, they are so difficult. And I know nobody tends to feel sorry for CEOs, right? Because they tend to be well compensated and a lot of them blow up in headlines, but these are really difficult jobs. And I think in the last few years, they've gotten even more difficult. And a lot of it just comes down to those moments where you realize I am in charge and the buck stops with me and I have to make a decision. I don't have good data for making the decision. I've got to make a decision. Some people are going to be unhappy and I might be right, I might be wrong, but I've got to be accountable for it. And just the reason it's called the Leap to Leader is it's really about a mindset shift more than it is a title on your business card. And I feel like people can lead from anywhere. They can lead from their seat, whatever their title is. But a lot of it is just understanding the mindset shift you have to make to be a leader.
That's a great point, because you mentioned not always do we have all the information. So we might say, how can he or she be that stupid to say this? But maybe they don't have, maybe we even have more information in our department or somewhere else that we know something they don't, or it didn't reach the top levels, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And look, the world has gotten so much more disruptive, right? I mean, the sort of visibility we have for the next 6 months, we can barely see it. And there's so much change. I think the business world would be better off if we replaced the word strategy with bets, right? Because strategy is just kind of a fancy word for making a bet. You have a strategy document and you do a spreadsheet with profit forecasts out for the next 10 years. But the world doesn't work that way. And I think it's much better to call what CEOs do, what leaders do, what companies do is they make bets. They have a theory. They have a hypothesis around client behavior, consumer behavior, market forces, macroeconomic forces. Everybody's just making bets and they're putting resources against those bets. And if they're right, they keep doing it. If they're wrong, they pivot. And I think it would take a lot of the pressure off, and we could have much more realistic conversations if we all just acknowledge that's what people do in business. They make bets.
It's so interesting. And I love that first paragraph because it makes me feel better when I think of something that, gee, I don't really feel I'm 100% competent in that. It might be the easiest thing, what time to take the dog out or something. But it still might be I know 80% of it or 71% or 12%. But you still have to take some action that day, whether it's at your job or profession or whatever.
Yeah. And you've got to make the decision. I mean, one of the things I've really come to appreciate, I've interviewed more than 1,000 leaders by now, mostly CEOs. And a lot of the times I'll ask them, let's say you're moving in a new company, you're taking over a new leadership team, you're assessing the team, who stays and who goes? How do you think about that? And a lot of them talk about just the simple ability to make a decision and how a lot of people struggle with that, because when you make a decision, you're committing to, path, like which fork in the road are you going to take, right? Or which road are you going to take when you encounter that fork? And you might be wrong. And a lot of people are really just uncomfortable making that decision. So I think a big part of being a leader is recognizing that it is your job to make decisions. And a lot of the times you're not going to have the data you want. And it's going to have to be a gut call, and you've got to live with the decision and be accountable for the outcomes. And that's tough for a lot of people.
And but by the way, you categorize your book as a practical guide. Am I correct?
Exactly.
And one, it's an easy read. I'm looking, it's probably less than 200 pages, so it's not going to strain anybody. But it's for the real world. It's not theories from history, etc. It's what's happening today, what we have to do, and how others around us are feeling as they're doing it.
Exactly. And my approach to leadership, which I've been using for the last 13 years is pretty straightforward, which is I don't wake up in the middle of the night, Bill, saying, I've got a new theory of leadership, right? My approach to understanding leadership is to interview leaders. I've interviewed more than 1,000 of them, mostly CEOs. And I stick to 3 currencies of leadership. One of them is insights. Tell me something that makes me feel smarter about how organizations work, the world, business, leadership. Just tell me something that makes me feel smarter. Then tell me a story to bring that to life so that I remember it, makes it feel real, sticky. And third, give me a practical tool, approach, framework, tactic, tip, something to take that insight and to put it in action. And I invite debate from anybody about that. Those aren't the best currencies of leadership, because the leadership field is a funny space, right? There's a lot of fortune cookie wisdom out there. There's a lot of platitudes. And there's a lot of theories of leadership with sort of Venn diagrams and tiered pyramids that pretend to explain everything about leadership, but it's just not that simple, and platitudes aren't helpful. So I just keep coming back to insights from real leaders. Tell me a story to help me remember that, and then give me a practical tool to put that insight into action.
I took a quote out of your book, and you said, it's about giving credit to others and taking the blame when things go wrong. And I laughed at you before the show, and I'll admit it. And I said to you, what? Are any of these people watching basketball, football players, baseball? But nobody takes the blame. It's always the other guy's fault or the GM's fault or the fan. So can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, usually. But if we're going to stick with sports, I mean, there are those moments with certain quarterbacks, right? Like they'll throw a pass and there won't be a reception. And you see the quarterback like patting their chest, like that one's on me, right? Or
Correct.
You see it on the receiver.
Correct.
So, I do admire people that like that, who do take accountability. We can have a longer discussion too about some sports. Like I find like the flopping that you see in some sports, the acting, they get barely tapped. It's like, I don't really go for that. My current obsession, Bill, is ping pong. And one of the things I like about the sport is that if you hit a lucky shot and it catches the edge of the table, the culture in ping pong is to sort of put up your hand and acknowledge that that was a lucky shot, which doesn't happen in a lot of sports, right?
Correct. No, actually, I think that's one of the few sports then, with the team sports, maybe today it's more all about me, where it used to be right. No I in team type of thing. But exactly. It must be difficult, of course, to do that because the leader is the leader. He, she is up there. They're considered the best, and now they have to take the blame and say, I messed up on that one, but I'll win on the next one.
Right. And just having the courage to make the decisions and keep moving forward. I mean, another big thing that I think is true of effective leaders is that they don't dwell on mistakes, right? You almost have to have more of an entrepreneur's mindset. And I've interviewed hundreds of entrepreneurs over the years. And I do think they are wired a bit differently. And I think one of the ways they are wired a bit differently is that they tend to not dwell on bad news, right? Like, they've got a plan, they're working it, something happens, and they're just always looking for the opportunity. It's like, okay, that's the reality. How do we get around it? What's plan B, C, D? And you need to have that mindset as a leader, because you have to go into it like a baseball player. And if you're batting .350, you are doing great. Like, you're just not going to get every decision right. And it is your job to make decision and keep moving forward and not beat yourself up. I think another big step that people have to make when they move into leadership positions, because a lot of people when people move into these really top leadership jobs, they've been successful all their lives, right? Almost everything they've done a really great job at it. And as you get into these bigger jobs, your batting average is going to go down. It's just the nature of it. And you can't beat yourself up. And so you have to know how to almost coach yourself and talk to yourself. And I always think about a line, a guy named Bob Brennan, who's one of our mentors at our firm, the Exco Group, longtime veteran CEO. When he's talking to young entrepreneurs, young founders of building their companies, they're beating themselves up, he will say to them, look, if you talk to your friends the way you talk to yourself, you wouldn't have any friends.
That really is good. I like that tip. And just as you were saying, I find I'm the one, I dwell on the smallest thing. If I couldn't get a parking space near the store, what's wrong with me? Didn't I find the right space? Couldn't I have wiggled into that space with 3 inches to spare? And so I'm figuring I'm not going to be a good leader based on this, but I hope there's a chapter that will kind of bring me back. Adam, before we go further, I'd like to let our audience know that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Our guest today is Adam Bryant, Bryant. His book is The Leap to Leader. And Adam, we're going to ask you, is there a website where we can find out more information?
Definitely. My personal website is Adam Bryant Books, plural, booksplural.com. And my firm is the XCO Group, but our website is excoleadership.com, EXCO leadership.com.
And a little advice from me, if you've just been appointed a leader or you're going to be the new assistant principal, or foreman, get hold of Leap to Leader. It's, as Adam said, it's a practical guide. It's an easy, fun read, and you're going to feel a bit more relaxed afterward knowing that most of the other leaders feel like you do. They're not going to be perfect, and we'll get a few more stories from Adam about this. Now, Adam, when you're meeting someone, what is the first question that you really want to know from that person? If you're interviewing them to be a leader, and what is the right answer? Because I want to make sure I have it right next time someone asks me.
Yeah. Well, if somebody says they want to be a leader and they want to move up, I think the most important question is like, do you really want this job? And are you clear with yourself about why you want this job? Because what I have found is just the way the business world works and kind of the way we're wired as human beings. Like, people who are ambitious, they want the promotion, right? They want the next big job. And I often find people don't really take time and pause and reflect on why they want these bigger jobs, because you have to be clear-eyed about what you're getting into. I mean, these jobs are really difficult. The higher you move up, the challenges are bigger. There's more people problems. The days get longer. Just everything about them is harder. And so you need to know why you're doing that, because if your answer is like you want the raise, well, the financial pop, like the benefits of that kind of wears off after a while. If you're doing it for power, like that's not really going to work, because that's not the culture of workplaces anymore. So you have to know what your personal motivations are that are going to help you get through the difficult times, because you are going to encounter them. And ideally, your motivation should be selfless. Like, we are all a mix, ideally, of selflessness and being self-centered, right? It's a little bit about others, a little bit about us. And there's always a mix in everything that we do. Lift people, lift organizations, have a broader impact on people's lives and create opportunities. That should be your drive, because that's going to get you out of bed every morning, get you excited, and help you get through the really tough patches you're going to face.
Now, the thing we're hearing the most, of course, today, and again, you bring out in your book, employees want a voice in policy setting, et cetera. And I think if someone said this 30 years ago, you'd say, well, go start your own company. But today, they come to your company and other companies, and they want to be heard. And they honestly probably have a lot of good ideas. And the root of the crowd theory, I guess, that they know what people want or what they're going to be happy with. How do you, as a leader, bring those two parts of leadership together?
Yeah, and to me, it's one of the many paradoxes of leadership. And I think, if we step back and say, why is leadership so hard? Because it is really hard. I think it's one of the hardest things on the planet to get right. And then you ask, well, why is it so hard? And I think a big part of the answer is that the core of everything that's hard about leadership is a kind of balancing act, a contradiction, a paradox, if you will. And there's so many things that feel like mixed messages about leadership, right? You're supposed to be compassionate and empathetic, but also hold people accountable. You're supposed to create a sense of urgency, but also be patient, right? You're supposed to lead from the front and lead from the back. So all of these things, and to your point, one of the many paradoxes of leadership is making sure that people are heard, right? Because everybody in companies these days, employees, they want to make sure they're heard. They've got opinions on things and about social issues that the company should weigh in on, and policies that the company should adopt. And as a leader, you have to make sure those people feel heard, because they don't feel heard, they won't feel respected. On the other hand, it is your job to make decisions and be able to say, I hear you, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. This is why this reflects the values of our company. But to have that sort of courage and do both, like, yes, I hear you, I'm listening, but we are making a decision, and this is why we're making a decision. So to me, like that kind of being balancing act of listening, making sure people feel heard, but also being directive, that's one of the really tough balancing acts right now.
And use that word, and I think it's a great word, the balancing act, because in a leader's day, everything really has such a consequence to it in terms of lives. If you have to cut 5 people right before, let's say, a holiday season, and you're going to change their lives significantly, and of course they're going to blame you no matter what, even if it was their fault or if it was just a matter of the economy. You have to make a decision whether to invest $500 million in this, that, or the other thing and hope it pans out, because you won't know for a year and a half. And, of course, within each department, you have many decisions to make that each one is coming to you and suggesting. So you by 12 o'clock, you could be exhausted and you haven't had lunch yet, and you're probably not going to get time for lunch.
Yeah, exactly. And you've got to have like a lot of stamina. You've got to have a really thick skin, because you're going to be second guessed and criticized. And again, like there is a certain makeup that you need to be an effective leader. And so I always tell people, like, be as clear-eyed as you can about what you're getting into, because these jobs always look easier from the outside, right? Until you're actually doing the job. And some of these leadership jobs, you can go into with this kind of theoretical approach. Oh yeah, I'll just do these 5 things. It'll be fine. It's like, most of what you're dealing with are people problems, and people are really complicated, and the problems have gotten more complicated in the last few years.
What are the traits that you would look for? Now, that may not make the full decision, but if you were looking over 50 resumes that your assistant brings into you and say, these are the 50 best, are there certain traits you're looking for, or is there you want to see a great school or a background or a quality or an anecdote?
To me, one of the biggest things that separates people at literally any level, I mean, sort of, from their earliest jobs up through their career, the thing that I think really sets people apart is, do you go beyond doing the job you've been asked to do, right? There's the job description you're given when you take on a new job. But I think the thing that sets people apart is, first of all, they say, okay, the job you just gave me, I'm going to figure out how to do it really well, really quickly, and really efficiently. And if I do that, that will free up some time for me to then look around and start thinking about, okay, how can I transform the job that you gave me? And then how can I take stuff off my boss's plate? And how can I look around for opportunities or challenges that could solve that maybe the company knows about, or maybe doesn't even know about it, and I see something. And that's the thing that sets people apart. Is, again, there's the job description, the thing you're expected to do, but there's just this mindset of like, okay, I'm going to do the job you've given me really well, and I'm going to make time for myself to create other opportunities to help my boss, help the company in some way, transform my job, leave it better and different than when I discover it. That's the thing that will propel you in your career.
You mentioned the word authenticity, and you say how important that is today. Can you express a little further on that? Because I guess no matter what leader you are, there's always somebody above you, whether it's the stockholder or a lack of money that you have or closing a plant or something. So how authentic should we be?
Well, you should be authentic, and people expect it more and more. I mean, the last few years, I feel like words like authenticity, vulnerability, humanity, transparency, we are hearing these a lot. And I think we can spend a lot of time unpacking those. I mean, those are kind of big words. But to me, the way I think about it is that if you are a leader, you have to be very clear on your personal values. And the way I think about that is that, people are always told when they're coming up in their career, you got to have your elevator pitch ready, Bill, right? And when you hear that, it usually means one of two things. Like, somebody might ask you, what are you working on? Or what do you want to do? Like, what are your career goals? Those are the elevator pitches we're always taught to have. But I think as a leader, there's a third elevator pitch you have to be prepared for, which is, what if somebody asks you, who are you as a leader? That simple question. And I think people are not often asked that question, but it's important to spend the time reflecting on how you would answer that question, to come up with the 3 or 4 values that are really important to you, and to be able to go beyond just words and phrases that sound right or good, right? They should be as unique to you as your fingerprint, and you should be able to answer all the follow-up questions that might flow out of that. So if you say, these are my 3 core values, like, why are those important to you? How did they become important to you? Tell us the stories about how they became important to you. What does that look like in action? Why are they important to you for driving success? And so that you are just really clear. Again, it all goes to sort of self-awareness, and that you can be upfront with people and say, look, this is who I am as a leader. And when you say, these are my values, you're basically saying, like, these are the lines I won't cross. These are the hills I'm going to die on, right? It doesn't matter if I'm under some kind of stress. I am not going to change. So if you are able to articulate those, I think it helps with authenticity. It helps with predictability. It helps with, you being sort of calm and confident and credible, executive presence, all of these things. Knowing your answer to that question, who are you as a leader, just has so many benefits, even if nobody ever asks you that question.
I love that question. I think it's a very tough question. And as I'm driving home tonight, I'm going to be thinking about it today. And how would I answer that question in real world terms, not just to make it smooth? Oh, I'm the leader who's going to make the most money. Everybody's going to be happy and we're going to have a big Christmas party. But I don't think that'll quite do it. But I think that's a terrific question. Before we go further, Adam, once again, I'd like our audience to know that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Our guest today is Adam Bryant, Bryant. His book is The LEAP to Leader. And Adam, once again, we're going to ask you if you could tell us the website where we can find out more information.
Sure. Adam Bryant Books, booksplural.com. And my firm is excoleadership.com, EXCO leadership.com.
And by the way, take this down, because you or your son or your sister is going to be faced with being a leader or being in charge of a group. And this is a wonderful, it's short book, it's right to the point. And as you can hear from Adam, he knows what he's talking about. Adam, if you were sitting on a plane, we're sitting there talking, and I asked you, you've interviewed 1,000 people. What's the toughest part of being a leader?
I think it's the loneliness. I think it's just that sort of those moments when you realize you're all alone. You have to make the decision. There's going to be consequences for people's lives. It's the weight of the responsibility on your back. You don't necessarily have people you can talk to about it. One of the CEOs that I quote in the book, he refers to it as these stoplight moments where, you're going to be facing some huge challenge and you just get really lost in your thoughts. You're driving home from work and you're sitting at a stoplight and the light turns green and you're still staring off in the distance trying to deal with it, and somebody's honking at you and from behind. And that's his shorthand for those moments that you are going to face as a leader, where you realize you're all alone. You don't know what to do. You have to make a decision, and the decision is going to have consequences, good and bad, for a lot of people. And it's all on you. And so you need to be, again, I keep coming back to, you need to be clear on why you want to be a leader, and know that you are going to have those moments. And people don't necessarily like them, but that you're up for them, right? That you're willing to take that weight on your shoulders.
In a simple form, and I'm sure you could expound on this in a whole book if we had the time and resources, but how is a way for someone who's listening, and maybe it's a small accounting company, 10 people, and they have 2 departments, how would you rate a leader? Is there a more or less generic way that you could tell us, or a system that we could start developing so that if that 10-person firm becomes 100, it would still work for them?
I think about this a lot. I mean, there's this phrase, servant leadership, that's very popular. It's been around for about 50 years, and a lot of CEOs use it. And I prefer to use the framework of, like, there's only 2 kinds of leaders. There's leaders who are more selfless and leaders who are more self-centered. And I think anybody who's worked for a boss at any point in their career, or a lot of bosses, you instantly know which category the particular boss goes in, right? We just feel it as human beings. We can feel it at a gut level about our boss. Are they in it for themselves? Do they see me as their employee, just as an asset to help them achieve their goals? Or is their focus me and sort of helping me grow and develop and coaching me and seeing career opportunities for me. And so to me, that's a much simpler framework and much more accurate framework for describing and also thinking about all the different bosses we've had. So to me, like you need to start there, because somebody who's self-centered, we've all worked for that kind of boss, and it's really demotivating, right? And hopefully we've all worked for a boss who's selfless and wants to inspire us and wants us to succeed wildly, and that is so inspiring. Beyond that, you need core skills like the ability to make decision. You have to have a mindset where you can simplify complexity. I think that's a really important art form of leadership, is simplifying complexity. I could go on, but those would be a couple of places I'd start.
And I always like cute phrases or terms. And you mentioned in your book something about the Capuchin monkey fairness experience. And I see you're laughing. But can you tell us what that is? Because I think it's a great conversation starter.
Yeah, exactly. And it really goes to this idea that how much we're wired as human beings to have sort of outsized, somewhat irrational reactions around anything that feels unfair. And a lot of the times when people are acting out in the places of work and their heads exploding, very often at the root cause is because they feel like they're on the wrong end of some unfairness equation, whether it's somebody getting a bigger office or getting promoted, or maybe they've got like 3 computer monitors and you've only got 2, right? Or they're getting more FaceTime with the boss. And so I urge all the listeners, go to the internet and type in the search phrase Capuchin monkey fairness experiment. And you'll see this great video about these 2 monkeys in cages, and this professor is sort of talking you through what's happening. But one of them is getting a cucumber to do as a reward for a task. The other one's getting a grape, which has a lot more flavor than a cucumber. And the monkey that isn't getting the grape literally starts like banging the cage and going crazy. And so again, the takeaway for me of that is like, if you understand what are some of the core drivers of people and motivations and what makes their heads explode, fairness or any perception of lack of fairness is very often the root cause of why somebody's acting irrationally at work.
And I like the way you put that term, the perception, because sometimes it may be just that it's the way we perceive a situation, and it's the easiest way for us maybe to make an excuse and get around the main terms. Adam, thank you so much for being with us today. Again, we want to remind our audience, the book is The Leap to Leader. It's by our guest, Adam Bryant, Bryant. And Adam, would you give us the website one more time?
Sure. It's adambryantbooks.com, and my firm is XCO Leadership, EXCO Leadership.com.
And really good book. If you're getting that promotion or want to get that promotion, get hold of it, read it, and you'll know all the right answers. Adam, again, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks so much for the conversation, Bill.
We'd like to let our audience know that you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at this same time when we will continue our journey to success.